Hey Paisanos, Cody Bannard here, and today I'm going to be briefly discussing my thoughts on a list of albums that released between January and February that I did not review yet, that I personally really enjoyed. With that being said, let's get started. The first album that I am going to review is the latest record from Iravu titled A Fate Worse Than Home. This is a self-proclaimed one-man anti-fascist extreme metal project in Malaysia, created by Harish Kumar Shangar. I think it's how you pronounce his name. This is a really impressive, fascinating, and inventive, progressive, and atmospheric black metal with elements of thrash and dark ambient and post-rock, and it's very genre-bending, but everything comes together very seamlessly in a very cohesive and also very concise package at under 34 minutes. If you love Hellripper's latest album, this is probably something I think you would enjoy. Although this one has a more dark and emotional tone that feels more reminiscent of something from like Mare Cognitum or something. Definitely highly recommended. Next up is the latest record from Cora's Heart, titled Anima. This is the second album under one of this woman's many monikers, apparently. She is incredibly prolific. This one apparently shares some songs with her debut from 2021 under this moniker titled Erica, but most of the material, to my knowledge, is new. And it's really, really impressive. This is a really interesting atmospheric black metal and black gaze with some elements of ambient electronica thrown in. Very much reminds me of something from like Violet Cold or A Light in the Dark, but with a bit of her own personality brought in as well. While it can admittedly be a little bit generic for its own good at times, even in its most standard atmospheric black metal moments, it's still very well executed and written and performed. And I would definitely recommend this if you love the aforementioned Violet Cold or A Light in the Dark, or other, black gaze artists like Death Heaven, Lamplos, or Olhava, etc. Next up, we have more black metal. Holy shit! From And Oceans. This new album from them is titled As in Gardens, So in Tombs. And I was really not expecting to like this as much as I did, if I'm being honest. This is some really tight, well-written and performed, and surprisingly somewhat emotive, symphonic black metal, kind of like Emperor, but with a bit more of a bittersweet tone that feels more reminiscent of like Alcest or something. The melodies are great, the production is tight. It very much refines and expands on the sounds that it is emulating to make it still feel fresh, exciting, and moving. And if you love really well-made symphonic black metal, yeah, this is definitely worth a listen. Moving on from black metal, let's talk about the latest record from Deathprod, titled Compositions. Deathprod is a Norwegian dark ambient artist that has made some really dark and creepy and provocative albums in both the 90s as well as the 2000s, with great stuff like Treetop Drive and it is somewhat called classic Morals and Dogma. This new album takes on a bit of a different direction for his general sound. Rather than being comprised of 3 to 4 long compositions that range from like 8 minutes to like 10, sometimes even 15 minutes on like his past work, this one is made up of 17 songs that range from 1 minute to 3 minutes. And all of them are like, feel like little subsections in like the same 40-minute piece. They utilize very similar sounds, but like in different keys or slightly different timbres. And while this album is very monotonous, it creates such an intense sense of dread through its minimalistic sounds. And listening to this at 12 a.m. Was not really a good idea. And I both regret it and don't regret it at the same time, because it is some really powerful and also very understated dark ambient music that is experimental yet also very simplistic. Definitely recommend checking this out if you love really interesting dark ambient music. Yeah, Deathprod is definitely one of the strongest in this style and has been for many years now. Going straight from dark ambient to ambient post-rock, let's talk about the new record from Hammock titled Love in the Void. Hammock is an ambient post-rock project duo that has made some really lovely and touching and moving records for a couple of decades now. And I'm especially fond of Mysterium, which came out in 2017. That album is an absolute emotional masterpiece, in my opinion. This one may not live up to other like masterworks in their past discography, but it is still a really lovely, touching, and moving listen, as always, from them. There's lots of beautiful, reverb-soaked ambient post-rock passages and lovely guitar melodies, occasional usage of dream pop elements with these very memorable vocal hooks that repeat quite frequently in order to drill their melodies into your head. While it's definitely a Hammock album, like there's not that much really new to this, and also the album I think is unjustifiably long at 72 minutes. That is not necessarily the worst thing in the world when it comes to Hammock, because they just know how to make very pretty music. And this continues to show that. I would maybe like a little bit more experimentation maybe in the future, but regardless, it's still Hammock being Hammock and also doing it really, really well, in my opinion. Next up, we have two EPs that I want to discuss, both of which are from French cinematic neoclassical style post-rock bands called Silent Well Becomes a Dream and Bruit, respectively. Both of these artists are very symphonic and classical inspired in nature, and both even shared the same label for a little bit. Silent Well Becomes a Dream is very reminiscent of the band Mono, but to call them a straight up Mono knockoff, I think would be way too harsh, because they still know how to make incredibly powerful, rousing, and beautifully written and produced post rock with really simplistic yet beautiful and immersive melodies and soundscapes. The orchestral arrangements are beautiful as always on this latest EP from them, which by the way I forgot to mention is called North, and the Bruit one is called I'll just put the name of it on the screen. I'm not pronouncing that. Anyways, the Silent Whale album. Yeah, it's really good. It's really beautiful. Admittingly, half of it features one remastered song that was initially a standalone single, which can make this feel a little bit just like a glorified remastered with like remastered edition of like previous material, but with like a bonus song or something. But I still think they do a pretty good job at still making that older song work well in the context of this EP, even if it is only made up of just two songs. Great stuff. Definitely got me in the feels. Anyway, that Bruit album, also great. Bruit have been one of my favorite post-rock bands for a few years now, actually. Their debut EP, Monolith, from 2018 is really, really good, showed a lot of promise, and they've lived up to that promise with their phenomenal debut album, which came out in 2021, called The Machine is Burning, which made it to like my number 2 spot on my top 50 list of that year, if I remember correctly. And this new EP picks up a little bit where their last record started, with these melancholic melodies and atmospheric passages and slow build-ups, along with weird genre fusing experimentations. What the fuck? Where the band would explore elements of like industrial and like ambient electronica in very effective and seamless and moving ways. It's just Bruit being amazing yet again. And yeah, I look forward to volume 2 of this, if this is going to be an ongoing thing. You never know. Maybe they'll release volume 2 as like a full album between the Bear to Be Parallax style. Who knows? Next up, we have the latest record from Fvnerals, titled Let the Earth Be Silent. And yeah, this album lives up to the name of both the band and the album, because this is some really dark, depressing, miserable, yet also very immersive and atmospheric funeral doom metal with some elements of shoegaze and post-rock, along with some very ethereal vocals in the place of harsh vocals that give things a very which adds to the melancholic atmosphere, but also makes things feel kind of haunting and ghostly, which I really appreciate. melodically, this album is pretty simplistic. Like there's these very repetitive, monotonous riffs and chord progressions that I can definitely see being patience testing and boring for some. But what this album really excels at is how it creates atmosphere. Think like of the lush soundscapes of bands like Shape of Despair with the apocalyptic misery of a band like Primitive Man, and you're kind of in the right ballpark. And it's definitely not the type of thing that I would want to put on for myself all the time. But this is still a really impressive and immersive experience. Next up, we have the new record from Klone titled Meanwhile. I've seen Klone's name pop up in like conversations about prog bands a few times, but I've never really checked out their music until now with this newest record. And I'm really liking this. This is, I guess, a really impressive first impression of the band's sound. This is some really atmospheric and provocative and immersive progressive alternative rock and metal with vocals that feel kind of like a weird mix of like Lee Staley from Alice in Chains and Jonas Rengse from Catatonia. Admittingly, this album is a little bit samey throughout. Well, not just a little bit, actually, it's very samey throughout. You can definitely very easily get the idea of what every song is going to sound like just from track 2 to 3 or so. But yeah, I still really enjoy this as a very consistently provocative atmosphere that is consistently there throughout its runtime, which makes this a very entertaining and fascinating listen to me. I'm very much looking forward to exploring the band's past discography. I might go down a rabbit hole or something. You never know. Next up, we have the new album from Ulthar, actually one of 2 new albums. This one, the one that I want to talk about the most, is called Anthronomicon. If you've heard both of those albums and you're curious to know my thoughts on Helionomicon, to use a weird metaphor, basically imagine if you had the option to eat the same hamburger, either with 8 or so smaller, more digestible bites, or with 2 large, relatively undigestible bites. That is what Helionomicon feels to me compared to Anthronomicon. Just the same hamburger delivered to you in 2 large, relatively undigestible chunks, but this time it's in the sonic form of 2 needlessly long 20-minute epics. Anyway, now that the negative stuff is out of the way, let's talk about Anthronomicon. This is some really dark, heavy, brutal, cavernous, weird, disgusting, and kind of unnerving avant-garde death metal and black metal, very much along the lines of Gorguts. Kind of like that Klone album, a lot of the songs very much try to accomplish the same thing, but they accomplish the same thing in equally effective ways, making for a listen that is exhausting yet also very consistently interesting and thrilling due to the great musicianship and production and really freaky sounding vocal performances from, I think, 2 vocalists, although I might be wrong. If you like Gorguts, this is definitely something that I would recommend checking out. It may not be entirely my thing, but I can still thoroughly enjoy and appreciate and understand the appeal of this. Yeah, this is really cool stuff. Definitely recommend it if you're into this type of stuff. Next up, going from death metal to ambient, we've got the latest record from Imaginary Softwoods titled... Fuck, what was the name? The Notional Pastures of Imaginary Softwoods. That's the name. Anyways, Imaginary Softwoods, who is an ex-member of the band Emeralds, has been making some really lovely and provocative and lush and also somewhat nostalgic sounding ambient drone and experimental music that is more often than not themed around gardens and flowers without ever being corny. This new album is no exception. Lots of very beautiful melodies and sounds, making for just more great Imaginary Softwoods material. While this one isn't really quite as adventurous or ambitious as some of his other works, it's still a very entertaining listen and also very relaxing listen. So yeah, definitely recommend it if you're into more unconventional ambient music. And yeah, going straight from ambient to deathcore, let's talk about the new record from To The Grave titled Director's Cuts. This album is pretty groovy, pretty filthy, pretty badass. There's a really good variety of sounds and ideas that is present throughout its runtime, and that level of ambition that they're able to showcase reaches a peak on the album's closing 8.5-minute epic titled "To Die Rise." But there's also lots of other bangers, including Red Dot Sight, Caught Off the Head, and probably my personal favorite, Protest and Sever, featuring Sam Crocker. And yeah, it may not be pushing the boundaries of deathcore too much, but it uses the tools that it has available really well to create just some really tightly built constructions that go hard, punch you in the face, and leave you wanting more. So yeah, good stuff. Very, very good, high quality deathcore. I liked it. Next up, we have the, I think, debut album from this very interesting artist called KAUAN. KAUAN's latest album is a unique fusion of Pliny and I guess at times Polyphia-esque instrumental prog metal combined with some explosions in the sky-esque post-rock to create a very fun, exciting, unpredictable fusion. There's lots of great guitar work and melodies all over this, along with some very cool little surprises in terms of the instrumentation along the way, making for a thoroughly thrilling, concise, and engaging 32 minutes of just modern progressive metal and post-rock goodness. Yeah, really good stuff. I was very pleasantly surprised by this. You never know, maybe it'll make my album of the year list along with some other stuff that's I'm talking about in this video as well. Next up, we have the debut album from model Actriz, which is this really dark, demented, and really fascinating industrial album with elements of like no wave and post-punk. I love the way that they explore all these different weird, harsh sounds that are not necessarily pleasant, but are unpleasant in all of the most interesting and exciting ways. There's also lots of really cool, very menacing sounding vocal refrains and good vocal melodies as well here and there. And while the band is very much focused more so on timbre versus traditional melody and harmony and whatnot, whenever the band do have more melodic, more quote unquote normal songs, they are very well written and very captivating as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is very, very fascinating stuff. The last album that I want to discuss isn't really a new album, but is a remastered version of an older album, and that is ATM Revised by KAUAN, which is the remastered version of their 2007 work called Avatulin Ma. KAUAN is an awesome post-rock and doom metal project created by Anton Belov that also utilizes elements of neoclassical and maybe subtle bits of prog. And they also made an incredibly beautiful album called Ice Fleet, which made it to my #3 spot on my top 50 albums of the year list for 2021. Love that album. Would recommend checking that out. And I also recommend checking this latest remastered album out because while compositionally it is very, very close to identical with some minor differences that don't really make a huge difference in terms of their compositions. The sound quality is more lush, it's more full, and it makes an already beautiful album probably even more beautiful. And in terms of the composition, the album is comprised of these really lengthy 10-minute epics that are interesting throughout, filled with very memorable and beautiful and very well written and melodies that are written with a lot of heart and thought. It is just really great, minimalistic yet also incredibly endearing and touching progressive post-rock from a band that very consistently releases high quality material. So yeah, those are my thoughts on all of those albums that I just listed. And so were there any of them that I missed that you would recommend that I would check out as well? If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment. And of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.